This segment is about blueprints, mainly from the Goldfield Consolidated Mines Company out of Goldfield, Nevada. This one here is a blueprint of the 100 stamp mill that's just outside the town of Goldfield. It was a 100 stamp mill, and it could produce 600 to 1,000 tons of ore a day. And it could work with sulfides, tellurides, and oxides. Shows the inside of the mill. And there's the tracks going to the mill from the Goldfield Consolidated Transportation Company. That was another Nixon and Wingfield short line railroad that went from the mines to the mill. And that's a transverse section of the mill. This was a blueprint that was put in the mines, and it's a fire notice. What's kind of neat about this is it talks about do not place lighted candles on timber or near wood or rubbish. So at the time they were using candles. No carbide lights, so this is before 1910, issued from the Goldfield Consolidated Mines Company. This is a print of one of the agitation tanks of the Consolidated mill. Just showing you the design of the tank. This is one of the 4 furnaces, the large furnaces that were used to refine the gold in the Goldfield Consolidated mill. This is an ore bin for the Consolidated Mines Company. Showing the side, the loader, and where it would dump, and then below that would be where either a wagon or some type of ore car would be there to receive it. This print, which is fairly large, I don't have it opened all the way, but it's a surface view of the mines of the Consolidated Mines Company, and then it also shows the buildings on each of the large mines, showing the mill, the change room, the storehouse, ore bins. There's the Mohawk. There's the warehouse and machine shop. Showing the barns, the head frames, the shafts. Kind of a neat blueprint. There's the red top. That also had a change room. Change rooms were generally used for to thwart high grading purposes, where they would steal ore. They would have to change their clothes before and after shifts in front of a watchman. This one is not in Goldfield, but in the Churchill County district, which is Fairview Mining District. George Wingfield and George S. Nixon owned a few of the rich properties here in Fairview, and they built a fairly large mill. In the mining district, and that was the Fairview Mining Company. There's the town site of Fairview. I don't think you can get there anymore. I think that's all government property as far as off limits. That's a neat blueprint of Fairview. This is a nice hand-colored underground mining map showing the levels of the Red Hill shaft, which is part of the Rustler Fraction, and the Red King, which adjoins the Florence mine. And shows the shaft and the levels. Fairly deep. This is one of the early master underground mine prints. This is all done by hand, and it encompasses the Jumbo, the Gold Wedge, the Mohawk, the Claremont, the Lucky Boy, all the main producers in its day. Probably around 1907, 1906, in through there. But you could tell the development that was done underground was just incredible. There's the Claremont shaft and all its drifts that interconnect to Winses and Raises and Stopes. Just a lot of development in these mines, and so early. It's just incredible. Look at the Jumbo and the different levels and offshoots. It's almost black. And then later on they did individual level prints to where it wasn't so mind-boggling. But that's a master map, early one from Goldfield Consolidated. Here's an interesting cloth print showing the change rooms in the change house of the Mohawk mine. It shows the timekeeper and watchman box. They had the counter. And then the miners were given 2 sets of lockers. One set to change coming on, one set to change going off. And here was their bench. And they were under the watch of the watchman, because there was a lot of stealing going on with gold. The ore was so rich in the Mohawk that Goldfield Consolidated thought their losses in stealing alone of the ore was over $1 million just in 1907. And that was when gold was $20.67 an ounce. So that was a lot of gold that Consolidated felt that was stolen from their mine, just the one mine. There were 6 other major mines that were having the same trouble during that time period. But that's the change house from the Mohawk mine. Here's a blueprint of the Claremont shaft ore bin, showing the bins and the car. And that was a railroad car that was off of the Goldfield Consolidated Milling and Transportation Company. So they would load those cars, and then the engineer would haul that 6 or 7 cars to the Consolidated mill, which was about a mile away. This is a blueprint showing the cyanide plant in the Consolidated mill. This is an ore skip from the Florence mine, and that's showing the skip that you load the ore in and you take it out of the shaft, and then that will unload into the bin, which will go to the mill. This is a lease map from 1908. And that was about one of the last years of certain parts of the Consolidated properties being leased out. Once the leases ran out, then Consolidated took full control of its property. This print is for a skip for the Claremont shaft, showing the parts and pieces, and then the pieces of the large skip at the top. There's the whole skip itself. Everything was all riveted together, heat rivets. Yeah, it's a large print. Here's a blueprint for a tunnel set in one of the Goldfield mines. Not too much of this was used because the rock was sturdy enough to where they didn't really need heavy lagging for the tunnels itself. Only the shaft and the stopes received a lot of timber. This is an original town site map from 1908. And this isn't a print. This is an original hand-drawn James Parks city map showing all the streets. Proposed streets up there way on top of North Goldfield that was never to be. Only Central Goldfield and South Goldfield were developed. But a lot of blocks. They thought at one time that the city could reach over 300 blocks. Quite a town. Goldfield, Nevada.